r/NoSleep. Posted by u/nomas39. I'm a teacher at a school for children who aren't quite human. Part 3. I think it's time to face facts. I really am no different from those morons in horror movies after all. I've been doing a lot of poking my nose where it doesn't belong recently. Recently, I found something interesting in one of the old storage closets, a school photo marked September 14. There the headmistress was in the back, and I could almost swear I saw a smile there, which I'd previously thought impossible. But she wasn't the only face I recognized. That little girl in the bottom right. It had to be Katie. Sure, she looked different. Blank and robotic and expressionless, like the Hastings were. As if she didn't quite realize how to act human yet. But it had to be her. Sure, it was chronologically impossible, but at this point, I was ready to believe anything. I beckoned her over to have a seat next to me at recess, photo in hand. "Hey, Katie," I greeted. "Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask if this picture, well, looked familiar to you." She took one look at the photo, and the biggest grin dawned on her face. "Ooh, hee, yeah, I remember that. That was when I first got here." She held it in her hands, and started laughing giddily at the sight of herself looking so stone-faced. "Look at me. I look so goofy. Man, I really had no idea what I was doing back then." "Are you sure? Because this photo, well, it was taken around 10 years ago. According to your file, you would have been a baby when this was taken." I took a deep breath. "Katie, can I ask how long you've been going to this school?" She froze. That big grin slowly fell into a frown, her voice lowering. "That's one of the things I'm not supposed to tell you." She shrugged. "Sorry. One of the things? Oh, God only knows just how many things even my students know about this school that I'm hopelessly unaware of." I think she could see the despair on my face, because she tried offering something else in recompense. "But I can tell you about him." She pointed eagerly to the boy standing beside her in the photo, an unassuming lad with dirty blonde hair. I'd never seen him before. "You see him? His name was Elijah. He was my very first friend, ever. He was the headmistress' son. Did you know that?" "No, I had no idea." I shook my head, flabbergasted. I couldn't imagine that statue of a woman having any family whatsoever. "Wait. Was? Can I ask what happened to him?" She looked left and right, before leaning in and whispering furtively in my ear. "Hunters." And then her friends called her over, and she went right back to chasing them around the playground, leaving me with a million lingering questions. I'll be honest, I'm not coping with all of this terribly well. I'm already lapsing back into old, bad habits. There's a good reason, after all, that I was fired from my last real job. But the moment I step onto school grounds, I force that smile back on my face. Can't let the kids know that there's anything wrong with old Mr. Vermeil. But I'll be honest. Sometimes, when I see them, I just can't help but wonder what hides beneath those masks of human skin. Am I doing the right thing here? The social skills I'm teaching were supposed to help them live a normal life, but what if they don't end up choosing that path? What if one of them instead opts to follow in their parents' footsteps, and grows up to apply the skills I taught them to lure in human prey? Blend into society like a skinwalker, and pick people off one by one? Would that blood be on my hands? It was just as my doubts were at their peak when I received the first text, from an unknown number. I was ready to dismiss it as typical spam, but opening it stole my breath away. It was a distant photo of me and Katie as we'd just been talking, and judging from the angle, it must have been taken from inside the school. I quickly glanced up at the upper windows, but saw no sign of any silhouette staring back at me. Accompanying it was simply the words, "Do you know what she is? Do you really, truly know?" I know I should have blocked the number, and immediately contacted the headmistress. But curiosity burned in my chest. I needed to know. So I replied, honestly, that I hadn't the foggiest idea. The next text came almost instantly. "This is the trail of death her mother has left behind in her wake. Study it carefully." Accompanying it was photos of several clippings from old local newspapers from various countries and decades. The first came from the Kodri of Moldavia. An old man complained to the municipality about a terrible buzzing that would echo across his fields for hours at a time. And then the letters stopped, and 3 months later, his body was discovered. Part of the reason it took so long was the complete absence of the stench of deterioration. It was though he'd been embalmed in his own bed, all fluids drained and organs removed with surgical precision. Cause of death was ruled as exsanguination. The next came from the forests of the Cameroonian highlands. A married couple and their child had gone out on a routine hiking expedition, and excitedly texted a friend about an immense bird they'd seen that had briefly blotted out the sun. That text was the last time they were ever seen or heard from. A week later, a farmer saw one of their skins fluttering in the breeze. That's it, just the hollowed, transparent, dried-out set of skin. The farmer had attempted to catch it, but the skin blew away in the wind like discarded wrapping paper, and was never recovered. That was just the start. He had a whole laundry list of articles, and poring over them brought tears to my eyes. Oh God, those poor people. What kind of creature could even do that sort of thing? My eyes drifted back to Kitty, and I wondered again what lay beneath that disguise. Given the age of that photo, was she even truly a child? For all I know, she could be older than I am. Another text. This place is playing you for a fool. I know what's really going on here. Meet me in your office. In my dinky little office, nothing. Doubt crept in. Was this some sort of test set up by the headmistress? I was just about to take my leave, when suddenly, an unfamiliar voice opened up from directly above me. Mr. Vermeil. I looked up, and saw a face staring down at me from the vent grate in the ceiling. No, not a face. It had all the features of a face: eyes, ears, nose, smiling mouth. But all arranged in the wrong order, as if plastered wantonly to a discolored, lump-and-o ball of flesh. It felt like something out of a dream. I stammered blithely, uselessly. The meat started to push forward, dividing itself into 5 neat sections through the slits in the vent grill like a human body being pushed through a pastry cutter. I watched as tissues and sinews and raw bone dropped to the floor like melting candle wax, melding into a puddle of viscera that grew solid as more biomass gelled with its bulbous form. And in time, that puddle of meat dripping from the ceiling became a man. That smiling face was staring me down again, now in proper arrangement yet no less deranged. He was handsome, actually, with a fit figure as perfect as his fine gelled hair. Nude, but sexless as a Ken doll. I finally started to run for help, but was stopped by the feeling of something digging into the side of my neck hard enough to draw blood. A jagged bone had jut from his wrist like the point of a spear. Ah. You had your chance to go running away. It's too late now, he whispered. Oh, don't look at me like that. I only wanted to make your acquaintance. I'm a big fan of yours, after all. A fan? I've always admired the sort of man willing to betray his own species for a quick buck, he mocked. This is nothing personal, really. I'm just here to do my job, just like you. In fact, I was thinking we could work together. I felt like I might faint. Seeing this, he let me sit down at my desk, albeit with the bone still to my throat. Who? What? Are you? Call me Saladin, he answered, in a tone that made it clear it was a pseudonym. And, well, I'd like to say that I'm still human, but that would be a lie, wouldn't it? Used to be. But in my line of work, I've had to find ways to even the playing field. I noticed the irony of being accused of betraying my species by a man who seemed to have forsaken his altogether. I was reminded of an old Nietzsche quote, something about he who fights monsters. Don't you mock me, boy. His face suddenly soured, as if he'd read my thoughts. You'd become some breed of horror, too, if you'd kept consorting with these unnatural things. When dealing with matters of the occult for long, there are 2 options: sacrifice your life, or your humanity. There is no third path. His cocky grin returned. Just ask poor William. Just hearing that name was like a punch to the lungs. It knocked the breath from me. William? You? Of course I knew him. He was one of my feelers. I posted him out here to see if it would lure out the hunting dogs. Prove this place is really as the rumors say. And sure enough. A streak of rage rose in my chest, battling the fear. And now? You want me to be your next useful idiot? I always like a man on the inside, he taunted. I only need to kill 1 child. Just a single one. And this entire initiative will fall apart like a house of playing cards. All the trust the headmistress has built up with the parents. Oh, they'd all tear her limb from limb. He saw the look of horror on my face, and laughed. Don't tell me you're actually loyal to her. Did she warn you of the danger you were in when you took this job? Has she done anything to your benefit? Do you really think she cares? Why do you think she even hired you? Just out of the kindness of her heart? She's a big believer in giving second chances to losers with a drinking problem and a rap sheet? He cackled. No. It's because you have nobody. You're a loser, all alone. So in case one of those kids gets the munchies one day, nobody will even notice you're missing. Sure, they may look harmless now, But make no mistake, sooner or later, some of those kids will need to feed. Isn't their fault. It's in their biology, their very being. They were made to prey on people like you and me. And you. You're planning on helping them blend in. Surround themselves with clueless pedestrians with tasty blood in their veins and meat on their bones. You don't see what's going to happen if this initiative succeeds? He could see it on my face, the doubt was creeping in. He grinned, retracting his blade and patting me on the shoulder. One kid. That's all I need. I just need to get one alone. But they're too smart for that. Always travel in packs. Sleep in that bunker down the mountain. But you? For you, it'd be trivial. As if on cue, there was a small knock on the door. A big grin crossed over Saladin's face. He held a finger to his lips as he melted through the slats of my closet, disappearing into the darkness just before my door went swinging open. There stood Katie, eyes low. She didn't seem to notice the sweat on my brow, the drop of blood on my neck, or the stupefied expression on her face. Her gaze was on the floor, nervous, as she sat across from me. Mr. Vermeil. I was thinking, and I know I said I'm not supposed to tell you certain stuff about the school and all. But I think you deserve to hear it, you know? Just don't tell the headmistress what I told you, okay? My throat felt dry. I could hardly think. Saladin's words echoed in my head, just one child. But seeing Katie's face reminded me that I didn't need to pick sides in some war I didn't understand. Sitting across from me was a child I'd been tasked with protecting. That was all I needed to know. Thank you, Katie, but I really think why you should go. Play with your friends, or... It's really no trouble. I don't know why she wants to keep so many secrets from you anyway. It's not like you won't figure it out, sooner or later. She didn't notice the droplets of liquid meat that were Saladin blowing in behind her like raindrops caught in a heavy wind. By the time flesh and sinew reformed itself over her face to muffle her scream, he'd already had her ensnared. It was like an anaconda coiling around its prey, the way those ropes of tendrilled, bubbling flesh entwined themselves around her, and Saladin's face emerged from those slivers of meat. Little miss. Katie, isn't it? Must be my lucky day. Your mother is a busy woman, you know. My client lost every single little person he loved to that thirst of hers. He was drawing something from his throat, some kind of black dagger, pulling it up like a sword swallower. I don't know, I wasn't paying attention. I'd leapt into action the moment he was occupied. Maybe all those horror movies paid off, after all. If there was anything they taught me, it's that any creature built of constantly morphing flesh always had the same weakness, fire. All it took from my desk was a half-empty can of deodorant and my dad's old lighter. I plied my makeshift flamethrower to whatever part of that oozing, fleshy mass looked the most exposed, pink and vulnerable. The heat and size of the erupting flames surprised even myself. He squealed like a stuck pig through unnatural vocal cords, and a tendril of flesh batted me across the room like I was weightless. But it had worked. Whatever parts of him the flames had touched were left bubbling and frothing, gooey and viscous like melted wax. But as he thrashed and whined, Katie seized the moment and let out her tongue. No, not a tongue. It was a proboscis. A long black, spiral tube, like you'd see on a butterfly. She'd tried to jab it into his neck, but he jerked his head at the last moment, and it ended up somewhere far worse, pierced through his eye. I thought the formless flesh that was Saladin was terrifying enough. But it was more terrifying still to watch it fade away, to see that flesh turn pale and veins wither like dying vines over taut, throbbing muscles. I realized she was sucking his blood through that proboscis like it was a drinking straw, and whatever other life essence flowed through the thing that was once a man. In seconds, his eyes and cheeks sunk in his face, like he was aging decades. I could only imagine what that proboscis would do to an ordinary human like myself. She was an inexperienced hunter. Saladin, wailing now, managed to worm his way out of her grip before the job was done. He took off through the window, seeming to evaporate as he smashed through the glass, letting the wind carry off those droplets of meat and empty veins as he scattered himself to the breeze. And yet again, another horror had gone as quickly as it had come. Katie pounced on me. I'd cried out for a moment, assuming she meant to turn that proboscis on me. But instead, she wrapped me in a hug. Mr. Vermeil. You saved me. I know that we could trust you. Ooh, you're the best teacher ever. I hugged her back just as the headmistress and the hounds from security came kicking down the door, and found an office covered in bubbling viscera. I told the headmistress everything. In retrospect, I was shockingly honest. She was just as stoic as always through most of it, but the mention of the word Saladin inspired a look of horror I'd never seen in her before. Him? No. He couldn't have found us, she whispered to herself, cupping a hand over her mouth. I'm laying in the infirmary now, being cared for by a nurse with a third eye and no interest in hiding it. That would have horrified me before. Now, I just cracked a smile. For better or worse, I've picked my side. I'm sticking by these kids, even if it leads me straight into hell.